So I'm Steve Boffy, and my link to hops was that my family lived here in Oaklepichard on a hop farm. And as a child, from when I was a child through to through my university years, etc., I'd come and work here every holiday. As a child, I'd be sent off every holiday from my home in Walsall to Herefordshire to work here on the farm and work and do all sorts of jobs. Yeah.
So just describe that contrast. What life was like for you in Walsall, and then what it was like when you came here.
So where I lived in Walsall, it was a council estate, a really big, notorious council estate, the Forest Estate, and it was a fairly tough place. My dad had died when I was just 5 years old, and it also meant that things were a bit wild there. Mum had 3 children and struggled, and she was Austrian, and sometimes I think struggled with authority and trying to understand how the world, particularly any authority figure or what was going on in the world. And so we had a fairly tough childhood, but the best part of our childhood was coming to Herefordshire to be with the rest of our family, and we'd all come down every holiday, whether we were picked up by my cousin or whether, as I got a little older, in particular, for lots of reasons, I was the one who was sent down here every holiday. My brother and my sister less so, but I had a talent for 2 things as a child. 3 if you include fighting, getting into trouble. I was often in trouble in fights, and the last thing was art. And so what turned into a career and a life in the end, art kind of saved me. But I found it a really, really good talent for getting into trouble, and that was my life when I was at home in Walsall. The estate was like that. All the things happening around you were like that. And I have to say, I never liked that. That was not a lifestyle I liked. It was very much that there was a way of surviving that, and you had to be just as tough as the next people, or you would just get completely trashed. And so you get caught up into that, but it was never a happy life. And I can't tell you how much of a contrast life here in Herefordshire was. So there was none of that. There was just lots of people just getting on with their life, and lots of the tension and the stresses there just didn't seem to exist. There's no doubt the fact that we had absolutely no money had a bearing that when we came here to work, and this was from an early age. So there's photographs that we've got of I guess us working in fruit fields or doing hop tying, pegging, whatever we could do as children, that would put a little bit of money in your pocket, and that would allow you to go and buy simple things other children had, like toys. I saved the whole summer once, literally a whole summer, to buy. Do you remember those little steam engine things that you used to get? Those that you put, and they would go along, little miniature steam engines. I saw in the window in Hereford, and there was no way we could have those kind of toys or things without working for them. And that continued as a student and right up until my adulthood, where actually, like my cousins and like everybody who came to work, particularly hop picking was the best paid job of the year. And without the money that hop picking provided, people just couldn't pay for what they had in life. Mum would have to spend her hop picking on things like the fridge had broken down, and we do without a fridge until hop picking. Your cooker wouldn't work, do without a cooker until hop picking. Clothes, going back to school. It's no coincidence that I know a lot of people who live around here still, their insurance and all sorts of household bills are due in September, and that's because they were always paid at hop picking. And it was that kind of the provision. It was like everybody shared in that bounty that hops provided, and it was really important socially.
I just wondered, so your mother was Austrian. Was there a sense of coming down here and fitting in?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. We had lots of friends where we grew up in Walsall. It was quite a close knit community, but there's no doubt that you were you felt slightly under attack at times. It wasn't a safe place to live. Like I say, it was a violent place, and having your house broken into, having thieves break into your house and was quite hard. So there are no. They say there's kind of in these places they glorify it and they romanticize about working class estates, etc. It really is kind of place where you just think there's no honour among thieves. That you work really hard for what you got and someone will come and take it, and that's quite hard. The level of community and the community spirit that was here was really nice. We liked that very much. I never understood why Mum didn't just bring us here to live. It would have been a much better life. And I guess where you grow up and those things shape you, and maybe it makes you a better person in the long term. I don't know. I can't comment. But coming here and doing social things, the fact that all my cousins, and there'd be lots of us here all the time, because in my cousin Inga's house, not just Inga and her family and her children, but her mum would live there for many years, and you'd always have lots of people staying there. I just got this memory of it felt like dozens and dozens of people living there. And so meal times are fun. Sometimes I'm sure Inga struggled to feed us all. We all had to pick everything from the garden and whatever we could eat, and everybody would muck in on trying to make things go around. In the morning we'd all set off and go and work in the fields throughout all our holidays. And Inga would get up at like 4:30 in the morning just to make the sandwiches. I think she'd make sandwiches for about 15, 20 people. Imagine, so it was tremendous fun. And at the time, it was hard work. And the times it kind of comes home to me is when I talk to other people my age and realise that they didn't do that as children. It's like, well, I've been working since I was, I don't know, probably doing hard jobs since I was 7, 8 years old. When we went potato picking or whatever, you had to pick potatoes, and they're heavy, and and you had to work long, hard in the heat or in the cold. And so it's all very interesting. I'm sure my wife says my life's much more like it would have been for someone who was at least a generation or two earlier. So, but that was circumstances. We had no choice. We did it, and it wasn't all bad. We had a really good time socially. We learnt a lot. And I think lots of the stuff I know now, I know because of that lifestyle I had.
Were you ever a terrier when you came down here?
No, we came down here and we worked, and we did have time when we weren't working. The days when we had time off, etc. Yeah, but there was almost not. It wasn't like that. Life wasn't like that. You didn't need to be a tearaway, so we had fun. We played. We did nice things. We went. Yeah. We. It was just a really different life that you didn't need. And I think being a tearaway, one of the things that's if people haven't lived on an estate like that, you see, I understand when I see programs and hear people talking about gangs, and I was never in a gang, but actually there's this pressure to survive. There's this constant pressure that weighs heavy on you. And it's like, you really can't step out of it. You couldn't walk to school without probably someone, chasing you, or you couldn't. There was a constant thing that if you'd ever had any kind of like fight, etc., someone else would see you. Even if you'd been successful and won that fight, someone else would see you as the next challenge. And it was like this hierarchy that was always about proving who you were and being defensive. And it was the fact that if you spend your life being defensive, that makes you a certain kind of person.
The anticipation that went with the thought of the next hop season and what it was like when you came down.
Very excited when we knew it was happening, and as you got to a holiday. And it was really exciting if we knew my cousin Charlie was coming in the car. Remember, we didn't have a car. Even going in a car was seen as such a treat. I'd get in anybody's car for a ride in the car. I'm saying daft now, but if you grow up, and remember, not many people on our estate had cars. Hardly anyone had cars. Not many people had dads, for that matter. So the idea of being picked up in a car, and it would take hours and hours and hours to drive down to Herefordshire. Charlie would never go on a motorway. He didn't believe in motorways, so we'd go the most convoluted route. We'd stop for sandwiches. We had our regular pub. We'd stop on the way down. It was a big, big treat. And so by the time we arrived, the journeys themselves almost became part of like a ceremony. There'd always be a hearty meal waiting for us when we got here. Inga would cook a lovely meal. And it's almost like you step out of one life into another life. And for me in particular, even more than my brothers and sisters, that was really addictive. So even as a student, whilst my brother started work when he was 16, etc., I went to art college, and I didn't want that to stop. So even now, I think of my bedroom at Inga's house at the orphanage as like my bedroom in a way. You know, it had been my bedroom for so many years that even as an adult, when I had my own wife and children, etc., we come and stay, and it feels like coming home. And I can only say that coming back to Herefordshire always felt like that. So now I live in Herefordshire. And for me, again, moving to Herefordshire was always one of those things where it was not an option. I've lived all over the country, different places, and worked all over the country. But actually, when I came back to live in Herefordshire, it felt fantastic, and it's like part of that history. I've got lots of memories of being a child in the hop yard. So typically what would happen is that, and this isn't necessarily around hop picking alone, this was maybe hop tying. The season would start at Easter, you know, and there's fields of hops to tie. Every single hop plant, which there are hundreds of thousands, had to be trained up by hand, up the strings. And so there's lots of work. And so the idea of going, as a child, it was like going on a picnic and going on an adventure. Not least of all because you'd always have, you'd have pop, you'd have squash, you'd have you'd have biscuits, you'd have sandwiches, and so when everyone would stop for breakfast or bait at I guess 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, that was great. You'd have another break around lunch, and so that I guess it was like picnics. I always remember eating, and I think I said, you know, there wasn't much money, so those picnics weren't grand affairs. Often bread and dripping. I mean, my wife's horrified when I talk about having bread and dripping these days. It's not the thing to have, is it? Particularly if you carry an extra bit of weight. But bread and dripping on white bread, I can almost in my memory of that now. I can almost taste that. And cold days when we'd huddle up in a car, all of us, so many of us huddled in this old sort of Wolseley car, and sometimes they let us put the engine on for a bit so we could warm up. But if it was raining, we'd be there in coats. I remember the puddles. I was always intrigued by the puddles in the hop yards that the tractor treads leave. So the marks that a tractor tyre leaves. And so there was this transition from when we'd do a little bit of work if we felt like it as small children, but then sometimes we'd play. And around all of the hop farms where my mum and Inga and everybody worked, I'd know the streams and I'd know the woods, and we'd make dens and we'd do some fantastic things. Have toy cars, and the tractor treads in the mud would be like little roads, and they were really good. So make mud pies, make little mud sculptures. The clay earth around here lends itself to making it. So all of these things, were really exciting as a child. The farmers would often put bales and bits of tin, so if it was really bad weather, you could go in to have your break out of the cover. I know on this farm they used to have this old yellow roadman's hut with two wooden benches in, and so they were like our dens as well. But all the different jobs, we'd make dens out of boxes on the blackcurrant when we were blackcurrant picking. Those old wooden boxes are great for making dens. So every different farm, every activity, etc., there'd be a sense of play. And then there were times when we'd have to work a bit, and as we got older, that would be a bit more. Maybe as children we'd go and collect people's blackcurrant boxes and take them to be weighed for a few pennies, save them trudging up the hill we had an old pram, my cousin's old pram wheels that we used to take the blackcurrant boxes on to have them weighed, and people would give us a share of their tokens. And so slowly but surely you get to the point where even as a child, we were working. We were probably, as by the age of about 9 or 10, we were probably picking as much as lots of adults were picking or doing, and that was good. Although I've only recently worked out that the farmers used to pay us less because we were children, but we were doing the same way.
Tell us about your visit to Derek Evans' studio.
Can you mention his name?
Can you mention Derek's name as well, and where it was, and what you were doing, and what you were wearing?
Yeah.
I'm joking about everything.
Yeah.
Oh, was it a full moon? Oh.
Yeah.
When I was a student, I studied photography at Derby, and a friend of mine, a guy called John Payne, was from Hereford, and it was just because of that connection with Herefordshire that we became friends. And on one occasion, when I was down here and he was back at home, he had worked for Derek Evans in the studio and worked in the darkroom, and that's where I think he learned quite a lot. John learned his trade. And I just met him in Hereford one day, and he'd been working and said, come and have a look at these. So we went into the studio and went into have a look, and there was a huge amount of hop picking. We'd been talking about hops, and John said, have a look at these, you'll love these. And actually, not only did we have a good look through, but I think they gave us one. I think I gave it to my cousin Inga. She's still got it at home on the wall.
Yeah.
Picture of... and it's probably from the 1960s when they were still picking hops into what we call cribs by hand before machine picking. So yeah, that was it was interesting how those things came. So when I saw this project and saw the archive, it was just one of those coincidences, I guess. It's slightly different that here they pick the hops in a slightly different way without a crow's nest. So this is picking with a crow's nest. Here they would have two really big Welsh blokes, Carl and Phil, if my memory serves me correctly. And basically the hop binds had been cut at the base, and whereas on these photographs there's a guy cutting them off the top wire with a sickle, they would pull them. So you'd not only have to snap the hop itself, which can be as thick as your finger and very, very tough, but also the string holding up, and so it was a brutal thing. And if anyone's ever seen hops or felt hops, you'll know they're covered in little barbs. They'll tear you to shreds. And so as the tractor would drive through, as these photographs are showing, the guys doing that, they'd be covered in all the water and the rain or the dew in the morning, and the dust in the afternoon, and they'd have to pull these things down. It's absolutely awful, some of the jobs, but it's what everybody did. Yeah.
Can you tell me, similar question I asked Inga, why you think it's important we record stories like yours?
I think for me it was the speed at which this stopped. So when I was young as a child, and then certainly as I was getting older and I went to college and could maybe take more of a wider view of this, it was really clear that this was something that in a way belonged in the past. It hadn't changed very much in all those years, and buildings like this beautiful building in which we're in had been used for a very long time, some of them for hundreds of years. And it was the lifestyle on this farm that you still had people come from South Wales, and they'd be living in what was not much better than a barn for the hop picking. The villages were thronged with hop pickers from all over, and it was the lifestyle that went with it, and that literally stopped. As an art student and a photographer, I had in mind that I wanted to photograph this. I knew that it was something special. And of course, what made it go very quickly was when lots of farms caught wilt, and the industry really kind of collapsed very quickly. So that's my understanding of it. But it was sad in a way. There was this thing that happened for years and years and years, and it was really part of the social and economic fabric of this area. And having been part of that, you kind of didn't always understand that, like these things when they go. And so the fact that it went so abruptly, and the fact that it was so much a part of this area. And I live near a village called Bosbury, and lots of the people I speak to in Bosbury were pickers and families, not only from Herefordshire, but people like me, people who had those memories as children, moved to the area or settled in the area. And so it's part of our history, and it's part of Herefordshire's history. And I think it's really important to make sure that those, not just the images, these images are a fantastic archive, but it's the stories, the people, the social things, the families, the hardships that go with that, and what a massive role this played in our lives. So this was one of the best times of the year for us, hop picking. I don't know how lots of families would have survived without it. So I think that's a really good story to be told.